Hello, everyone. This is the Crowley case updates. Today is December 23rd, 2019. This is Dan, Catherine, Sophia, and Greg Fernandez Jr. How's everyone doing?
Hey there.
We're here.
Doing great.
Well,
How's everybody else?
Very good, very good. Tonight's topic for the broadcast will be the skull movement and the metadata relating to these 4 crime scene photos from the Crowley case archives, I should say. And Catherine, want to take it away?
Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you, Dan and Sophia and Greg. Thank you for all your help, especially Greg. He's been dealing with me a lot tonight, trying to help me, and I failed miserably. So we're doing it this way. But thank you everyone for joining. And tonight we're going to talk about these 4. Actually, I've included another photo, so it'll be these 5 photos and the metadata. On the right-hand side of the screen, you will see the metadata where it says the file name, file size, file type. And what we're going to focus on tonight is the created time. So you will see for this photo here, for BCA 4760, they have a timestamp of Saturday, January 17th, 2015 at 7:04:31 p.m. And these are the photos that show the movement of the skull piece. And what caught my eye is not only the fact that these skull pieces have moved, but how quickly these photographs are taken. I inserted this one, the 4761, just so you can see the timestamp sequence. Now we know this first one here, 7:04:31. This next one, 7:04:40. So it took them 9 seconds to go from this photo to this photo, which is pretty quick. You know, that doesn't leave any time for really anything. You're just taking a photo. And then from that one to this next one, we have 7:04:58 seconds. So within 18 seconds, I'll show you this one, a close-up of this photo. You see where the movement of the skull piece has begun. If you recall this first one, let me open this one so you can remember. We'll just do a quick recap as we're going about that, as we're going through these photos. Sorry about that. Now this is the first one. You see how close this skull piece is to the words light and summary. Then we have the first movement, and then you see how it's moving away. It's actually been moved away quite a distance from the word light and from summary, but especially from light. Let's compare that again. Okay, now I'll go back to the manage section here where we'll talk about the metadata. For the first photo, it's at 31 seconds, and on the third photo, it's at 58 seconds. So 27 seconds, almost a half a minute later, we have a huge movement of that skull piece. Now we'll go to the next one. We have 7:05:05. Let's compare and see how far this one has moved. And again, it's moved even more. So you have that, and this one. And then the last of the 4 which shows even more movement. Now, I just wanted to recap and show you guys so you could remember how those skull pieces moved. And now we're going to stay focused on the metadata. And this one is 7:05 and 15 seconds. So within 10 seconds, it moved again. So these photos, the way they're moving, the way this metadata is set up, I hope you, what I'm trying to get you guys to see is that within a total of, we have 7:04:31 to 7:05:15. So that's 29, it's less than a minute is taken place and is gone between how these photos, oh my God, Sophie, if you can, I'm not getting this across. Can you word this better for me, please?
Sure. In less than a minute, the skull piece has been picked up, moved, picked back down, moved, picked up at least 3 times. Is that was
Yes.
it 3 or 4 times, Catherine?
3 times.
3 times. So this all occurred within supposedly less than a minute, and we're just
Yes.
finding this very difficult to believe
Yeah,
when you
and
look at
thank
the
you.
metadata.
Yeah, thank you for getting that. I do not know where my words are tonight. They've just disappeared. But yes, so what they're trying to get us to believe, like Sophia was saying, is that within less than a minute, this was, yeah, less than a minute, it was picked up and moved not only 3 times, but then they also had to then focus, get that shot in the lens, focus, snap that picture 4 separate times, as well as moving this skull piece 3 separate times, all in less than a minute, according to the metadata. Now, I think we all know that that just cannot happen. I mean, they're not the Flash, okay? This person cannot move that quickly. Do you have anything else to add, Sophia?
Well, would you like to explain to the audience why you feel this way? What your background is?
Yeah, some of my background, as most of you guys know, I'm like a jack of all trades. I have done, I've dabbled in a lot of different things, and photography being one of them. And it wasn't until actually Dan had talked about the metadata that that had completely skipped my mind until Dan had brought it up. And then I'm like, wait a second. And he was, Dan, what was it that you said about the metadata?
The metadata is the information behind the scenes that is recorded in the firmware that the camera, when the photo takes. And so those are behind the scenes. And this had come up earlier on I think the Sandy Hook investigation where this came up. And so we thought about that. And then we looked at these photos and then went into the metadata, which is behind the scenes. In this particular case, it's that Nikon camera D200 that was taken by the Minnesota BCA photographer. And we can see the increments in between the photos that are normal increments if nothing is moving around, 9 to 15, 30 seconds between photos when they're taking 400 seem reasonable. This time, we've got 2 situations. One is the skull piece in particular is moving in relation to that book text in the Quran, which means someone on the photography staff was handling the evidence, which is a big no-no to begin with. There shouldn't be anything touched at all. And if something was touched, it looked like it was put back in the wrong spot. And if it was handled and touched and moved and maneuvered, how in the world could we get to the increments of 9 seconds between photographs? And so what we're getting into for today's broadcast is showing that the evidence suggests the Minnesota BCA someone in the BCA was editing the modified or the creation date timestamps on these 4 particular photos knowing that I think that if it did come up like we have found it now, they would be able to explain it and say that no, that wasn't the case. And so the thing is, not the date, but the time was edited and then saved before they became public to make it show that the cameraman was quickly taking photographs through this whole time. But there could have been 15, 20 minutes, and an hour, who knows what was going on between the time here. And this is all in the metadata, which is also called the EXIF data, EXIF data that goes along with any camera image or picture that was taken. And because of Catherine's background with photography, we thought it would be best for her to look into this. And certainly enough, she has exposed this. I'll call it an irregularity. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, and to keep Dan feeling comfortable, I'll use the word irregularity. I have other words that are just as descriptive, and I feel more accurate. But for the sake of keeping it copacetic tonight, I'll go along with that. And that was it, because I have a Nikon D70 camera, so I have a very similar camera to the one they're using. And as far as metadata goes, programs like Photoshop, like Corel Paint Shop Pro, which you guys can see, which is what I have here on my system. I prefer Paint Shop over Photoshop, just my liking. They're virtually the same program, with a few few differences. But over here in this metadata, it can be typed in, added, altered, changed. And these programs, that's one of the touting points for their programs, is like, hey, you can create your own metadata. You can make it say whatever you want to say, because if you're taking a photo and it's like one day, but you actually want it to fit in with a series of photos that were taken another day, you simply change the date and timestamp, and then they all fall into place. Now, and like Dan and Sophia were saying, what these timestamps are saying and what these photos are showing us, what they are trying to get us to believe is that that these photos, basically they're just hoping we look at it and go, oh, look, yeah, these photos were sequentially taken, and this is this is normal photography, normal picture taking. But looking at this metadata, darn well, and when you look closer at the photos, there's no way, it's virtually impossible unless you are the flash, to take these photos, to pick up that skull piece, to then put it back down to where it sort of resembles the original, the control photo. I'm going to call this first one here 4760, like the control photo. And then when you see these other photos that are similarly placed on the floor, and like here, you see this skin is kind of put under this skull cap. Same here, except for, well, this is sticking out a little bit more. But still, in order... Oh my God, I am so sorry, guys. I am just losing my brain. It is virtually impossible to pick these skull piece up, place it back down on the paper, focus on that, take that photo, and then go on to the next in the time frame in which this metadata is showing us. And this is huge, because what I then question for the rest of the photos obviously, if these are not correct, none of the photos are correct on the timestamps. What else? And like Dan was saying, since this can be manipulated and typed in any way they want to, how do we know? We don't know what happened in between these photos and how much time actually elapsed. You got anything else to add? Anybody?
This is Dan. This is Dan.
Yes.
I would just like to add too that we have talked in the past about the Crowley crime scene being staged, and I think it's fair enough to say that it certainly was, either before or after the murders. But this shows, and that, just to clarify, was staged by the killer or killers. This shows movement and manipulation of evidence at the crime scene by law enforcement, officials, whether it's the BCA, Apple Valley Police, the detectives. Those are the only people on the scene at this time of day, which I think was 1 in the morning or something roughly. So no one else was there. There's no one else the law enforcement can point the fingers to blame this on someone else that was manipulating and or editing these photos. These photos are from the Minnesota special agent in the BCA. So that's the number one question. Number two is the photographer's job at a crime scene is to take photos. That is it. Not to handle the objects, not to move them around. Some have suggested maybe they lifted it up to get a photo of the other side of the skull cap, the underside of it. Well, that's for later in the lab to take the additional photos of the crime scene. You're taking just the photos as they are or in situ, without anything being moved. So the fact that, number one, we've got an issue that the skull cap in this case was moved. Number two, it looks like the time stamp date time modification on these photos were altered to make it look like, if anyone was to raise suspicion of looking at these photos, to cover their butts, they put roughly 9 seconds between each of these photos to make it not stand out as something that's strange. And like Catherine was saying, they would have been better off if they used 15 or 20 seconds or something else to make it more believable, because you're still zooming in, you're aiming, you're focusing to take that shot. And 9 seconds doesn't even seem realistic. So not only did they fail in moving and touching the evidence, they've also failed in the editing of the time of day on the stamps of these photographs. And there's no one else that they can point the fingers to, inside or outside of the, who we think or theorize could have done this murder. But the question now is, this should be enough in itself to reopen this case because of the malfeasance. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. And the only people who could have manipulated this metadata is the BCA. These are their photographs. These are their people who are inputting this metadata information. It was someone on their watch who put in all the wrong timestamps. This was not by a mistake. This was on purpose. I'm sorry, Dan.
Sorry, one more thing, Catherine, just to let the listeners know is, the crime scene officials were there on the 17th when the bodies are found, and I think it rolled over past midnight on to January 18th of 2015. So the dates taken would make sense because they're all either the 17th or the 18th. And then what we do see from the BCA, that when they were handed off, when the photos were all done, being submitted, and I guess the case was closed or this person turned in their job, it was turn in their the photos into Apple Valley. All these had dated January 28th, which means that would make sense. The 15th to the 28th, maybe they had these for 13 days, but they all went to Apple Valley and landed on the desk of, I'm sure, Lead Officer Gummert by the 28th. So whatever happened, according to us and Catherine, was altered before they were even submitted on the 28th of January, which is 13 days later. So something was done, and it wasn't just that day or that night. Someone also was going in and editing this. By the time they had all these pictures taken and downloaded, there would be time that would allow time back at the station or back at the office in the BCA laboratory of whoever special agent was doing this. There was 13-day window to do the manipulation, is what I'm trying to get to. Go ahead.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, you said it better than I did. That's exactly what I was trying to say, is someone from their department, because you can set up the metadata and you can have it assign timestamps. You can do it randomly. You can do it in time sections with groups of photos. which also explains why many times, and I know you've said it before too, Dan, but I do believe others have said it as well, is that the group of photos that we received, they don't seem to fall in line. It's like some will be downstairs, some will be upstairs. You'll have a picture of the kitchen and then a bedroom photo, but yet they all follow a particular, this staged, for lack of a better word, staged time stamping. These are not obviously in the proper sequential order, but they are in the order of the timestamps that they were given. And so now that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt these timestamps have been tampered with, you know, my question now is, what else has and what else was tampered with? How am I, from a person on the outside looking in, supposed to believe anything of the evidence that has been presented or is being told to us, the public, when something as vital as a timestamp on a photograph has been manipulated? Sophia,
And Catherine,
go ahead.
that's a good point, because of the errors and omissions and changes and modifications that we see on this evidence of a triple homicide case, something this large, we have to throw out the potential truth on all the photos. If these ones were changed, like you were saying earlier, and I'm not sure if the listeners understood it, when we received the photos back from the FOIA request, the name of the files all do have a naming convention in sequential order that they use as their the nomenclature for naming the files. But if you put them in order, the photos don't line up, like you said, of the basement going to the upstairs to the downstairs. They should all be in a nice, clean order. So that raised suspicions for folks 3 years ago. That was even raised. Now we're getting into the metadata of the, not only is the sequential file name out of order, but the metadata with the time and the date stamp is out of order. And so what we have here is the artist on the right, if you show your arrow there, Catherine, shows S.A. Katsovitz, and that's the Minnesota BCA special agent, Katsovitz. And that, in looking at who was on the scene at the murder scene, was not this person, but it was assigned the person's name who may have been editing or putting this together or downloading or submitting this on a CD-ROM over to Apple Valley Police. So I think this person, Mike Katsovitz, was in charge of doing that, not taking the actual photos. The problem is, if we were to open this case back up and get these people under testimony, under oath, you would have to bring in both the photographer, whoever it was, taking the photos because things were moved and moving and altered, and the person editing or modifying the EXIF data or the metadata. These would be the two people, both employees of the Minnesota BCA, that would have to be brought under testimony or under oath to get them on the witness stand to say, to have them explain themselves how something like this would happen. And so that's the other thing here. We've got more than one culprit. The person editing, special agent, because this Katsovitz name does not show on the log book of those entering and exiting the house that night of the crime scene officials or the investigators. I don't think. Greg, can you confirm that? I think the photographer was someone else, Beth Eilers, I think.
Yep, that's right. Definitely not the same person. He wasn't on
If
scene, period.
If this would get brought up and the case reopened or re-examined, one spot that a prosecutor or someone well-versed in this would bring these two people under question first to show them the inconsistencies and have them explain how could this possibly be done. And what we've exposed here, I think, tonight already is the fact that there is no such thing as a coincidence. The photographer would obviously know if someone was handling or if she herself was handling the evidence, and the person making the edits at the back end, back at the office before January 28th, was making edits and or changes or falsifying. These are crimes, correct? These folks would be charged in a in a lawsuit, if that's the case, if they were found guilty of making any types of manipulations in a case like this. And so this is not us pointing fingers at the Apple Valley Police Department or some shadowy group doing a murder of these families, or guys from the gray state or family and friends, whoever else we can bring into the actual that potentially be part of the crime. This is at the crime scene the night the bodies were discovered, and then in that 13-day window before January 28th, when all these CDs got handed off to Apple Valley Police detectives, edits and changes were made. The question is, why? Why was anything touched? Why was anything changed? And why was more than one person complicit in conspiring to do so? Is the real question.
Right, and there's something else I want to bring out and stress here too. Now, didn't the BCA or the police report, somebody said somewhere that they took around 800 photos, correct? At the crime scene?
Yes, and I forget if that was the BCA or the AVPD, but one of them took 800. I forget how many the other one took.
And just to clarify that too for the listeners out there, the Apple Valley Police Department, their own photographer came in as part of the detective crew and took crime scene photographs, which number I think 400 or so at least that were taken. And then the BCA came in with a separate person and took additional photos, I think numbering close to 800. So there was a lot of photographs taken, and I don't think the pictures of the Quran or the skull piece was included in the Apple Valley photographs at all. Obviously, they would be, because this is such a big nature of a crime, with all this right there with the skull, the bone fragments, the Quran. I didn't see any focus on this segment from the other photographs at all. Only the BCA, which really exposed this for us, because there was the 4 different photos right here, all taken in the same area that were the goofy ones. So we're focusing here because this is actual evidence.
Yeah, and another thing I want to bring out about that too is in the file, either Dan or Greg, one of you two guys, I know you guys know this answer, but the file that says 711, and it's all the photographs, well, not all, but I think they're all the photographs that they sent. Are there 711 photographs in that file, or is that just a random name for the file 711?
Nope, those are actual numbers.
Okay, so there are 711 photos in that file that they sent. And this is what I want to point out. So if they took roughly 800, a little over 800 photos, which is to be expected. If it was me, I probably would have took like 2,000. But, I just like to take a lot of photos. Not that I think they did it correct. What I'm trying to say is BCA probably took the correct number of photos. However, that leaves about the right number missing, because they're not going to send the photos of the bodies and all that other stuff. So those were taken out. So in other words, they sent us everything else except 4. And that is where I think I'm trying to stress the importance of this information that we found. These photos and the date, the timestamps don't match up at all. And that's for all of the photos that they took. What they sent us, and these here are not just leftovers, is what I'm trying to say. They didn't say, okay, we took 1,500 photos, so we'll send you 700 of the 15. They sent us 711 of the 800. So am I putting that across how important that is? I don't know if I am or not.
Yeah, it's very important. Because if there's only 800, then there's not that many photos. There can't be that many photos of those bodies. So that doesn't leave a lot. But they also did video too, right? So
correct.
They have
that
as well.
And that's how important this is these photos we have right here are the photos that they had. They are the photos that they said they're using as evidence to prove their point. And these photos have been manipulated and data introduced and put in incorrectly on purpose. Someone had to sit down and type this in. This was not an accident.
Well, if you look at some of the Apple Valley photos, some of them do say process. Like they'll have the BCA or not, they'll have the AVPD number or the DSC number, and then they'll say process. So I don't know exactly what, you know what I mean? So there might be maybe they process, I don't know if they only process some of the photos, certain photos, why some of these are processed, but that could be a whole nother thing. Do you think it's worth drafting a letter, drafting a note, reaching out to the BCA to ask them to clarify it? I mean, it's a great way to connect with them, I think. It's a question they should be able to answer.
Well,
if they have a logical answer.
Yeah, you mean ask them what? About these timestamps, or about what does it mean by process?
Yes, about the timestamps.
I mean, I don't see how it could hurt, but how are they going to explain that, though? I mean, they're going to have to come up with a whopper of a story.
I would love to hear what you come up with, and I'm sure you would too.
Yeah, we would. And Sophia, I don't know, do you want to talk about the one that you found, or do you want to wait until another time? Because I think this is the clincher.
The one that I found?
The timestamp on the photo you showed me.
The photo with the body bag.
Yes.
Sure, let's go ahead and pull that one up.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I had to think back.
Is that part of the 711 photos, or is that something else?
I
don't
got
think
that
it
one
was.
from the Apple Valley, please. That wasn't a part of the BCA.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I have a copy of that photo.
I have it on my phone. Just one second. I can give you the number. Just give me a minute to find it. And let's see. And the reason why I had picked that photo was because we were talking privately after you made this discovery, and Greg had mentioned, well, what happens if okay, one second. It's DSC 0254.
Yeah, and I don't have that one on here.
Greg, if I sent it to you, can you screen share it with her?
Yeah, if you, what's the number?
It's DSC, it's the Apple Valley one, 0254.
Okay. What's the best way to send it to you, Catherine?
Well, I'm sharing screens right now, so anything I do, it's going to be shown to everybody. So
maybe I should pull it up online. 05205. What was the number? 0254.
0254, and it's the Apple Valley one. And what Greg had brought up was that he had thought maybe the skull piece had been moved because the bodies were being removed from the scene. But this shows that those photos were taken before the bodies had been placed in the bags. And then the skull pieces were removed. And then the bodies were removed.
yes, because
what goes along? Oh, sorry.
And no, I'm sorry. What was the timestamp on that body bag photo? Wasn't it something like 10 something at night?
You sent that to me in an email. I think it was much later. It showed like maybe 2:30 in the morning, which is not true because Kamel was placed in her body bag before 1 o'clock in the morning, and the ME left with the bodies before 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, because I think I'm remembering it opposite then, because I thought they had it time-stamped way too early, and then because the medical examiner didn't even get there until midnight or something like that, or 12:15, and they had already had the bodies bagged and ready to go at 10 something at night. So I think I have it backwards. So yeah, we're going to need that photo to look at the metadata.
And I'm looking for your email right now. There it is right there. Greg has it on screen.
Okay. I can't see his screen.
You'll see it on YouTube in a few seconds.
Oh, okay. I'm not on YouTube either. Oh.
Okay, you can't be. Just picture it there. We'll draw you a picture.
We'll have a sketch. I'm gonna go to YouTube.
Well, I got the photo up here. What was the importance of this one again? Just so I can.
It was the
that the skull
metadata.
pieces,
The metadata. Okay.
that the metadata and that the skull pieces were already removed. And there was a question that I always asked myself in regards to the photos from the BCA, especially the photo of the bodies. And it was, are we seeing what they want us to see? And after the metadata information came out, that pretty much clinched it for me.
Yep.
I had posed a question about how many photos the Apple Valley did actually take, because we got 464. Jim Gummer says that we did not get hundreds of photos. So, but I don't know if there's anywhere that shows how many photos they took in total. So maybe if somebody can help dig through that, I don't know, might be in the notes. You know, just dig through 1,000 pages of data. You'll find
For
it.
this photo, oh, I'm sorry. I came across the metadata information. Dan had ran it through the system back on December 2nd, and he told me that the picture was taken at 2:34 a.m. on the 18th by a Nikon D90.
Okay,
The
so
bodies had already been removed from the crime scene at that time.
yes, yeah. Yeah, we know that for a fact because you said at what time? 2:30. What again?
2:34.
Okay. Yeah, because if you guys can see my screen still on these photos, which is clearly after the bodies were removed, the timestamp is 2:03, and then you have a photo of the body bag, and it's 2:34. So these timestamps are all messed up, and they're especially these ones from B. I'm sorry, what, Greg?
I'm just trying to figure out why.
Yeah.
They're not taken in order. They're not. You know, it's not room to room. How do they account for that? I mean, I'd love to hear them answer that question, and maybe we could get something in writing.
Yeah.
Greg, I have an answer on those processed JPEG photos.
Yes.
They have the name, all the rest just have the DSC underscore and then a 4-digit number that, that are named is how they're named. The processed ones came through all later. There, when they had to go back to the scene to get those pictures from the attic and the picture of the hole in the ceiling in February, a month later, February 2015. And those files are very small in relation to the others. And so I think they were taking with the lower quality or lower resolution camera, and I just dropped a couple for up there just on the using the site www.photoforensics.com and uploaded those. They don't have date or timestamps on any of those ones that say processed.
Okay. And there's also another set that I think there were 4 different sets, 4 different labels just in those 464 BCA. Some of them were actually like image 001, image 002. I remember seeing some of those too, but I do remember counting somewhere that there were at least 4 cameras used.
Yeah, and a good thing to point out is what Greg mentioned earlier for the listeners. These cameras are taking photos in sequential order from 1 to 2 to 3, and of all the photos of the total population of photos that the detectives took, that's the total pictures that are, you know, in the case file. When FOIAs come through from us asking for, you know, all of the photos, they have the right to censor out the graphic photos and not provide them to us. Now, because their bodies were all found in one single room, one would expect the photos that we didn't get, regardless if there's 10 or 20 or 30 of those, all to be in the same vicinity of the number naming convention of these files, but they're not. They're all jumped over the place, and there would be no reason to censor us from sending a FOIA request of photos if there's nothing graphic in them. From there wouldn't be anything in the basement, the office, the kitchen, the bedrooms, bathrooms, things like that. So why would there be random photos? In other words, um, other than the graphic ones that were removed, filtered, or censored from being sent out to folks like us making requests. When the request is all the photos, it should be all of the photos, excluding the graphic ones. But there should only be a handful of those graphic ones, and they all should be in the same order where they're all missing. We're seeing photos missing from numerical from the sequence all throughout these 800 photos, whether it's the Apple Valley or the BCA photos. And so it's once again, it's another irregularity, I'll call it.
Yes.
And the last thing here, I got to jump off in about 10 minutes. The last thing I want to get through, just to have the listeners understand, is that I know many of you, we've got a lot of people joining and a lot of members that are joining the group on the Justice page, and they may be saying, well, why would they move the pictures and why would they alter them, and for what purpose, and who would gain and who would benefit from making all these changes and edits? The purpose of tonight's broadcast is that doesn't matter what was changed or why it was changed. The question for tonight's broadcast is that it was changed, and it was changed by someone in law enforcement. The question is not, the question then is why, not for what purpose or why they did it or what were they doing, or, you know, maybe it was coincidence. We know now that it hasn't, and it's not coincidence. The question now is that they have to answer the proof. The burden of proof now is on them, not for us to say, you know, why, or wonder why they did this, or what would be the reason, what would prompt someone to make these changes like that. That's not part of our question. What we're trying to get through is we have evidential proof now that tampering was taking place. That should be enough to reopen this case, and then let you know, then let the investigators look into this into this further.
Well, I couldn't have said it any better, and thank you for saying it for me. And with that, I don't have anything to add. I just wanted to show everyone that there is proof, and we did find the proof in the evidence that was given to us that the metadata was manipulated is not correct, and the timestamps are incorrect. And that, to me, is huge. And
Now,
with
Catherine,
that, I'm done. Yeah.
I have a question, Catherine.
Okay.
Actually, for all of us here, someone might be watching this and asking, do you think that the investigators, when Jim Gummert's team back at Apple Valley received the CDs of photos from the Minnesota BCA, would they have done any research to notice this or the irregularities, or would this have raised their antenna to say, why are these dates and timestamps wrong, and why is this metadata screwed up? What would be if someone asked that question?
My personal opinion on that, and it's just an opinion, and you know what they say about opinions, is that the Apple Valley Police Department, the investigators were there while these photographs were being taken. Chances are they saw exactly what was going on. So when they received these photos from BCA, they probably didn't give them another look because they already knew.
Yeah.
Their decision had already been made and the narrative already written, and they had no reason to go and see if somebody made a mistake. They just put it in their file.
Gotcha.
I would have to agree. The
And I
same
would
thing
guess,
with them receiving reports and telephone logs. I honestly don't think that they even looked at them. I think that they just received them and put it into the system, and that was it.
yeah, I would agree. This is Dan. Is that the city of Apple Valley deals with on average one homicide per year, and it's probably just a basic type of a homicide. Nothing covered up, nothing dealt with at levels like this one is. And so I would guess, and my personal opinion is that the detectives at the Apple Valley staff wouldn't even know to look for the metadata in the crime scene photos to see if anything was altered in the first place. I would guess none of them even had the thought or the wherewithal to even look at this. And I think that's what we're up against. Is some call them Keystone cops, some call them elementary, young, entry level guys who don't deal with crime. They wouldn't know to look for these things, and that's where I think that a group like ours, where we got this justice page set up, that are literally, and I'll go on record to say, are leaps and bounds above and over the heads of investigators who do this for a living. This is a way above and beyond what a normal detective would even look at in a murder case like this, is my guess. And that's why when we sent this to the Minnesota Attorney General, and we sent this off to the sheriff's, Dakota County Sheriff's Office and the Minnesota State Attorney General, this is what we're talking about. We are not sitting here wasting our time doing this for the fun of it. We're exposing the crime that obviously took place and have the evidence to back it up. Kenneth Main's got this, didn't notice the metadata. He's a professional cold case investigator who does homicides, and was, I hired him. These guys don't look for these types of things. That's why we're here to stress this, to get videos like this out there, to share them, to give them to when you're with family and friends at the holidays. Family and friends are over for Christmas. Share these types of videos and photos to get this case out there. Greg Fernandez, his book is coming out next month. And if that doesn't do it, I'm not sure what else can we do to get exposure to this case where this fraud has been perpetrated.
Well, I think that's great. You said it all. And does anyone else have anything else to add? Greg, Sophia?
I'm seriously concerned about what else has been manipulated with this case and what has stopped them from doing this to other cases that they have been involved in. I really think that it's time to start reaching out to journalists and trying to pique their interest, showing them what we have, and hopefully they will pick this up and write a story. Because if we could get exposure, then the police are going to have to answer some questions.
Yep.
Would
Well,
it be
seems if
possible,
Go ahead, Dan.
Greg, would it be possible to get Special Agent Mike Kadovitz on here and Beth Adler's on a show to do a live interview with them, to put them on the record, to at least
Yeah, I can.
make it, square it up, to at least get the story out there before they were to face potential indictment?
I can definitely take on that task of just reaching out to him. If you guys want to help me draft up some letter or something like that to make it very short and concise, and then I can, I can send that off to him, or I can just ask him, hey, what the heck's going on here? How do you guys account for this? Because, I think I can definitely do that.
It may be worth sending a link, sending them both a link to this video and just saying, what are your thoughts? Contact us if you'd like to get your story out there. This is very damning, is all I can say.
Well, if it's
Absolutely.
newfound information, and if they haven't checked the metadata like you've been talking about, then that would be newfound information that they would have to look at and take seriously, right?
Correct.
So, that's, we have another thing. Now, Catherine, I know you had tried that with the whole blunt force trauma thing, right? You tried to contact Jim Gummert and let him know that this is also newfound stuff that they might not have seen. Am I wrong in that?
No, that's correct. And his response was basically, and I'm paraphrasing, they didn't care. Nothing I showed them, nothing I would produce to them, I could give them nothing that would make them reopen the case. His words, not mine.
Okay, even newfound data, because then that's a big problem, right?
Yes, even newfound information. And I did put out there, and there on my channel is that phone conversation I had with Gummert, where he does state, and he says that according to the chief, that no matter what we do, and that's what I asked him. I said, so no matter what I give you, even though this is new and you see, I've shown you blunt force trauma, that David was murdered, you're not going to do anything. He says, no, the case is closed. We are not going to reopen it.
I would send it to the Minnesota BCA person in charge of this case. They're the head person maybe first, and then CC or copy Eilers and Kadovitz and see what that gets, and then send along a copy of this video. The other thing would be, when we're speaking of metadata, would be the all-important photograph that someone saw on Sean Wright's smartphone of the dead bodies. The metadata and the EXIF data on that particular image would be enough to put certain people in prison, slam dunk. And so that's the other importance of metadata.
Yes.
There should be no crime scene photos on anyone's smartphone, much less of a hand potentially in the basement when there was nothing in the basement. And so an exit data for things like that, and we know that smartphones are backed up regularly, and data is kept in the cloud, and so that's something that someone like a Sean Wright should be thinking about, as far as that data is out there. It is backed up and is replicated. And so if that would be a case like that, he may have simply deleted it off his phone, but that image was out there and saved on whatever kind of plan he had back in 2015, when that image was taken on his smartphone on what I believe to be his camera at the scene of the murders before police got there. And so the whole photographic evidence with the EXIF data and the metadata is huge, because it places people at places. A lot of the ones nowadays also track the GPS location. These photographs will track latitude and longitude of when and where that photograph was actually taken. And so it's a good point for people looking into that type of thing on other crimes as well, because the photographic evidence is usually one of the best to go from.
Yeah,
Yep.
and we had contacted Jim Gummert about that hand in the basement, and he's like, there was no hand there. They didn't find a hand in the basement. There was nothing there, but we have heard that, you know. I think even Shauna Wright or Mason Hendricks said that there was a hand in the basement or something like that. I do remember that. I forget exactly, but
Yeah, they said they were on record to say that there was body parts found throughout the house.
that's
And
right.
then I remember asking Gummert directly when I went to pick up the CD in the Apple Valley at the FOIA request. I talked to him directly, and he said there's no body parts found throughout the house. Once again, he alluded to the fact that the dog ate everything, but we've talked to people who saw body parts and have photographic evidence of body parts throughout that house. So once again, someone is lying, and that's what we're here really to do, is to expose the case, and hopefully you know, someone will either come forward, or maybe some of these officers, once they retire and get out, they will be more interested potentially in doing a show, doing an interview, even if it's not with their real name or something. They can certainly come on a show like this and talk about what they actually saw behind the scenes, because that's what it's going to take for something like this, is to have a whistleblower come forward to do the right thing, to do what their oath forced them to do, is to be loyal and you know, protect and serve the community. Right now, the city of Apple Valley, and I know they've got close to 50,000 residents there. There are a killer or killers still on the loose from the Crowley case that's coming up on 5 years. And if the police do not do their job to protect and serve the community, that's what they are hired and paid to do. Not to be complicit in a cover-up, and not to let something go unnoticed that is not correct. So hopefully we get someone coming forward that work in some kind of establishments like that, some kind of BCA, Dakota County Sheriff's Department, Apple Valley Police Department. You know, they move around. They get up there in age, they retire, and they're not bound by those laws once they are out. Once they retire, once they leave, they can come and do shows like this, even under a hidden identity or something, and talk about the actual truth on a case like this.
Dan, Paulette is asking, she asked a great question that I'm also curious about. She says, do you have to take it to the Attorney General first? Something like this. If it's newfound stuff, if we're getting roadblocks, Catherine is constantly asking questions, bringing up new things that they're not looking into, that they've I mean, just the fact that they said that it doesn't matter if you found new things. Is that something that we could bring up to the Attorney General? Can the Attorney General help us at all?
Well,
I think you could, because James Gummert should never make a statement like that on the record anyway.
Horrible.
That's ludicrous.
Well, he was speaking on behalf of the chief, because the chief refused to talk to me. And so the chief was saying, they're not going to do anything. Let her know we're not going to do anything. And Gummert's like, we're not going to do anything. But just so everybody knows, I have spoken to several departments, and I have obviously not this information with the photos, but with the blunt force trauma and the other stuff that we found. I sent it to this. I was told to send it to the city council. I sent it to the city council. Send it to the Dakota County Sheriff. I did that. Send it to the governor. I did that. Send it to the chief, the police chief. I did that. Send it to the attorney general. I did that. Send it to the governor. I did that. I sent it to everyone with the exception of BCA. They're the only people I have not sent it to. And no one, I heard back from no one. Even my follow-up calls were met with silence. So everyone in the way I am now seeing this is every single department is covering it up. They're turning a blind eye and they don't care. But now that we have, this information, we have proof that the metadata was manipulated and altered and put in there to mislead people as to the timestamps. We have people who actually Sean Wright and some other people who have said body parts were all over the house. Look at my photo. And other people from another group, which shall remain nameless, who have said, we've seen those photos. There were body parts there, and the hand wasn't mummified. Well, that means it's a fresh kill. So how did Sean, according to these other people now, I'm not trying to throw him under the bus, I'm throwing this question out there. How did Sean Wright get that photo of a non-mummified hand on his phone? And how come the police, and the police know about this, have never done anything to question him? There is so much wrong with this. I'm sorry, what?
Are you sure that the police know about this, about that stuff?
You know, do I know for a fact? No, but everything's rumor mill at this, you know. It's the he said, she said, they said, the police got it. So how do we know? The police have turned a blind eye to everything else.
Right.
And just for the listeners out there and the new members, the two adults that were found in the house, David and Kamel, each have two hands, so there'd be a total of 4 hands in that house. Kamel was missing both of hers when investigators got there. David was missing one of his, which only left one hand left. It was David's left hand. Photographic evidence shows that it was in a mummified state. There are no other photos. There should be no other photos of hands. What we're saying is people have talked about seeing a hand unattached from a body in that house, whether it be the basement or not, and in a non-mummified state. The only way a photo like that could be in existence is if the killer or killers took a photo to have that photograph. That, to me, is a pretty big deal if I was Chief Wrightsville or Jim Gummert. If a photograph of any type of thing like that is floating around, that means that someone was there taking photographs, and it wasn't David. Now, we already know David didn't do this. The question is, who did? Well, my first suspicion would be probably go talk to the people who have photographs on their cell phone at the crime scene that were not taken by crime scene personnel. That would probably be your first indicator. But like Catherine said, they're not going to touch this case with a 10-foot pole. So our only job is to keep circulating it out in the court of public opinion and get it out there in the public. But I would certainly send this to the Minnesota BCA, and they're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination either. They have been complicit in some other various crimes, and so they don't have the best name for themselves, the Minnesota BCA. But if you were to send it to the two individuals relating to the direct complicity in this case and their boss or whoever was leading them at the time back in 2015, I would certainly guess it would raise some eyebrows.
And it's also important to remember that the person that supposedly has this photo was never even interviewed by the police.
Correct. And that was, and we're not talking even interviewed as far as in a pool of suspects or even a suspect. We're talking, Sophia, what you're talking is was not even given a statement, not even talked to by police. If you read the 94-page police report, Mason Hendricks is one who's not even listed in that report. And I think Sean Wright was the other one. And so the question is, why weren't they talked to when you were the potential best friend? David's personal Rolodex was Sean Wright. His name wasn't talked to.
It's funny that you bring that up, because Sean Wright is mentioned, and there's 3 or 4 people that are mentioned in the police reports that they spoke to. but they don't lay out the same. They don't say, okay, well, this is what Sean said. This is what, person 2, person 3 said, which is very. It makes you wonder. Well, if they did that, because they're very thorough with Danny Mason, they're very thorough with Mitch Heil. They're very thorough with some of Kamel's friends. But when it comes to Sean Wright, and I forget who there were like 3 people on that list that it's briefly mentioned that they talked to them. They didn't have anything to say. I think Jason Allen is actually one of those people too. But then it's just like, they didn't know anything, blah, blah, blah. And if we need to contact them in the future, I know how to get in contact with them. But Sean Wright did not want to give out some of his information. Is that a sign that he's not cooperating? Things like that. It's like, did they know Sean Wright? Did they know some of these guys? And they're like, oh, these are great guys. We don't have to worry about them. We're just going through the motions. If they're going to thoroughly interview Danny Mason and Mitch Heil and some of these other people, why aren't they doing that for people like Sean Wright, for Hendricks, for Adam Schambauer, and some of these other people? I mean, Chris Peck, right? They go through him, and so why are they kind of cherry picking? And then some of the people that have been the most nuisances, some of the people that have been just kind of very forceful to try to get people to stop looking into this case. Why are those a lot of the ones that are not even mentioned, are not even part of it? They weren't there. They didn't know they didn't know anything. They weren't questioned, but they're spokesmen for what police say happened.
Greg, I would guess that when you get people in the crime like this, where the local police in the county and maybe even the state are looking at it, I'm sure someone at the federal level will come in and cross a couple names off and say, you know what, don't interview these guys or let these guys go. That's usually in the case of a federal informant or a paid informant or a confidential informant that's working on the side and are protected. And so that's likely the case with the Mason Hendricks and Sean Wright, who are likely, I would say, fall into that category. That would also explain the fact that if Sean Wright is showing that photo on his smartphone, another reason he's doing that is that he knows there will be no backlash for that, which also leads me to believe that he's protected in some way, shape, or form, that he knows he's getting away with that kind of a thing. So if we have federal informants of some sort and confidential informants or CIs involved in this case, that is very likely as well. That's why I think we're seeing some of the behavior we are, because there's no fallout, there's no threat, there's no repercussions for some of these folks. The very first threats that I received came directly from Sean Wright himself, and so that's another thing that you wouldn't see in a normal case like this. Something handing out emotional and physical threats to people, but with a guy like Sean Wright, doing that, knowing he didn't even have a care in the world that he knows he's going around threatening people via instant message and on Facebook, and because he knows there's no repercussions, he knows there's no follow up, and nothing's going to happen, and so that's where you kind of get your evidence by looking into it and backing out what can't be true. Sean Wright, once again, best friend, human Rolodex for David Crowley, name doesn't appear in any kind of a witness statement in the Apple Valley Police Department at all. And Mason Hendricks, very, very similar. So you get some of these characters here playing a role, so to say, in this case, and they're also the loudest, yelling and screaming from the rooftops that we are the bad guys here. Kind of gives gives one the answer already.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right, guys, I gotta jump off, guys.
Before you jump off, actually, does anybody else have anything else? Because I'm ready to jump off as well, and I would really like Dan to give us the outro.
Oh, sure. Yeah, any other questions for tonight?
I was just checking the board for on YouTube. Looks like everybody is pretty much agreeing.
Well, thank you, you
So,
guys.
Yeah, we also have to also look in a case like this that there might be multiple people or many people involved in the crime or the cover up, or the subsequent redirection. But you have to look for who would be potentially the ones actually committing the crime. And in listening to an interview today from a detective, they said you've got to go to the one who's got a history. You have to look for those with propensity for violence, uh, violent run-ins with the law, violent domestic assaults, domestics, violent behavior. Those are the ones that are going to be your most likely person committing the actual crime. Yes, the others can be around to help cover it up and to help lead people down the right path and the right road, down the wrong one, I should say. But it's those, look for those that are in the orbit of these people that are dealing with this, that have a propensity for violence. And in this case, you get two people that stand out: Eric Sayward and Sean Wright.
Yep.
Both have a long, lengthy violent criminal behavior, and have never, I don't think, spent any day in prison. Little short terms in jail here and there, but that is about it. So that would be your culprits down that road when you're looking into suspects. But yes, we have a whole range of people that should have been brought in to the pool of suspects to at least be questioned about a case as violent as this. A professional hit, yes, I could see that. Typically, they're going to come in wet work operations like that and commission the killings, and out they do, out they go. This the staging of the scene is too overboard, which means that it's not a professional group behind it at all. But our show today focused on the photographs from law enforcement that were altered both in the photograph taking and also in the editing room later with the timestamps that were changed in the metadata. And hopefully we'll get someone from a special agent from the BCA to come forward and give their thoughts and share some of this, because it certainly got into the hands of the Apple Valley police detectives and they did nothing about it. Once again, today is December 23rd, 2019, and I think we got a good show. Any other questions from the chat room, Greg? Or Sophia?
I've been keeping an eye on it, and I haven't seen any questions that have jumped out. Mainly, they're just concerned about being blocked by Apple Valley and possibly higher up the chain.
Yeah, and I would concur that that is being done. Gummert himself may be, trying to do the right thing, but is being blocked from the people above him, whether it's the police chief or the captain there. But once again, in my understanding of the law and the oath that they take, your job is still to not find that acceptable. Your job is to step down, step out, and go public with something like this, and put the criminals behind behind bars. And if that means your superiors, so be it. And sadly, that's not the case here. But we have to find out why this case has been suppressed and shut down, and why at such a high level. Um, so that is what we're dealing with here. Feel free to share it, leave your comments and everything below, and share this with your friends and family here over the holidays. This is, once again, actual evidence. This is not make-believe. This is not theories. This is not hearsay. This is evidence that could put people behind bars. Thanks again for listening, everybody.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Good night.
This session is no longer being recorded.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Are we still on, Greg?